Decisions made in Washington can affect your portfolio every day. But what policy changes should investors be watching? Washington Wise is an original podcast from Charles Schwab that unpacks the stories making news in Washington right now and how they may affect your finances and portfolio. Listen at schwab.com/WashingtonWise. Decisions made in Washington can affect your portfolio every day. But what policy changes should investors be watching? Washington Wise is an original podcast from Charles Schwab that unpacks the stories making news in Washington right now and how they may affect your finances and portfolio. Listen at schwab.com/WashingtonWise. Last week, I watched President Trump's trip to the Florida Everglades, so you don't have to.
President Trump traveled to Florida today to inspect the site of a controversial new migrant detention center dubbed...
Newscasters said he was there to visit a new detention facility, but that's a pretty grand name for what he showed TV cameras. Tents set up on an airstrip in the middle of a swamp. Inside were bunk beds behind chain link.
Surrounded by dangerous wildlife and oppressive heat, the administration is calling the facility Alligator Alcatraz.
Can I just take a point of privilege here? Because I want to say I hate this name. Alligator Alcatraz sounds like a late-night movie on the Sci-Fi Channel. It's enough to make you forget that this is real life. And this administration plans to send actual people here. People whose humanity they are steadily eroding with every press conference. Anyway. 2 weeks ago, what was this facility?
There wasn't a facility.
Sommer Brugal writes for Axios in Miami. She was watching this press junket too. She says a couple weeks back, the idea of putting a detention center in this remote corner of Miami-Dade County, it was laughable.
It's an airstrip in the middle of the Everglades that back in, I think it was the late 1960s, it was proposed to be the world's largest airport. But that project eventually fell apart because environmental groups and residents pushed back. And also there was a huge environmental impact study that was done that showed that doing so and moving forward with the project would have huge catastrophic environmental impacts.
Those environmental impacts aren't a concern now?
They're a huge concern for people who are opposing this project. It's one of the main concerns.
Nevertheless, Florida's governor, Ron DeSantis, he seems to have been happy to push aside the usual processes and open up this facility in just 8 days. Last week, he and the president showed off what they'd built, while Trump called migrants monsters and people of the worst order. Oh, and they were selling merch, buttons and golf balls and T-shirts emblazoned with Alligator Alcatraz.
I think critics of this and environmental groups would argue that this is, a political stunt. But I also think it's important to know that this fits into a larger effort by Florida and the DeSantis administration to be the number one state in immigration and in assisting the president in his deportation efforts.
It's a stunt, but it's real.
Correct.
Yeah, and we should be clear that at the press conference for this facility, Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem basically said, I want other people to call me up and tell me that they want to do this too. We want to have facilities like this in other states. Every single governor should be wanting to do what Ron DeSantis is doing here.
Yeah, I mean, I think the quote, if I remember correctly, I think she said something along the lines of, she hopes that her phone is ringing off the hook from governors from around the country hoping to, or asking, how can we do what Florida is doing? And that's something that, Trump himself mentioned a couple times, and I think could potentially become a blueprint for other states to follow.
Today on the show, Alligator Alcatraz could be just the beginning. I'm Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around. This episode is sponsored by Home Chef. Do you ever find yourself eating the same thing over and over again and in need of a little inspiration? Home Chef is here to make searching for new meals and cooking a new dish something to look forward to. Home Chef sent me a few of their meals to try out, and I gotta say, when it is a Home Chef night, it's a relief. There's no staring at the fridge, wondering what kind of sorcery you're gonna have to do to a wilted head of lettuce. No complaints that you're making the same old dish one more time. Everything is portioned out, ready to be thrown together by me or even my teenage son. Home Chef has everything you and your family need for hassle-free, delicious dinners, and with over 30 options a week, they cater to a variety of dietary needs. Users of leading meal kits have rated Home Chef #1 in quality, convenience, value, taste, and recipe ease. For a limited time, Home Chef is offering What Next listeners 50% off and free shipping for your first box, plus free dessert for life. Go to homechef.com/whatnext. That's homechef.com/whatnext for 50% off your first box and free dessert for life. homechef.com/whatnext. Must be an active subscriber to receive that free dessert. This episode is brought to you by Built. Built is the perfect rewards program for those looking to earn airline miles and hotel points just by paying rent on time. There's no cost to join, and just by paying rent, you unlock flexible points that can be transferred to your favorite hotels and airlines, a future rent payment, your next Lyft ride, and more. When you pay rent through Built, you unlock two powerful benefits. First, you earn one of the industry's most valuable points on rent every month. Second, you gain access to exclusive neighborhood benefits in your city. Built's neighborhood benefits are things like extra points on dining out, complimentary post-workout shakes, free mats or towels at your favorite fitness studios, and unique experiences that only Built members can access. And when you're ready to travel, Built points can be converted to your favorite miles and hotel points around the world, meaning your rent can literally take you places. Start paying rent through Built and take advantage of your neighborhood benefits by going to joinbuilt.com/whatnext. That's JOINBILT.com/whatnext. Make sure to use joinbuilt.com/whatnext to sign up for Built today. It sounds like a month ago, no one had really heard the words Alligator Alcatraz. So can you just explain to me where the idea for this facility came from?
Yeah, so that's actually still a question I think a lot of us are still trying to figure out in terms of, was this proposal in the workings for, some time now? Was it being floated? Was it being discussed?
How did you hear about it? Like, who told you?
A tweet. I saw a tweet, and it was Florida Attorney General James Othmeyer tweeting out the video and tweeting out this proposal and using the term Alligator Alcatraz.
We should just explain this video for people who haven't seen it, because it's got like a lot of guitar going on.
Yeah, it almost seems like a movie trailer almost. It really is hyping up this proposal.
Attorney General James Othmeyer here at the Miami-Dade Collier training facility. This is an old, virtually abandoned...
And I'll also say in the video, it says, in 30 to 60 days, this could be up and running.
The governor tasked state leaders to identify places for new temporary detention facilities. I think this is the best one. As I call it, Alligator Alcatraz.
But the video is very, high energy, a lot of action.
You don't need to invest that much in the perimeter. If people get out, there's not much waiting for them other than alligators and pythons. Nowhere to go, nowhere to hide.
We should probably set up who Attorney General James Othmeyer is, because it seems like he's pretty close to Governor Ron DeSantis. So I can understand why you're trying to puzzle out how the pitch for this facility came to be, because it seems like it could have come from anyone, but certainly came from inside the DeSantis administration.
Yeah, he was appointed by Governor DeSantis, not elected, but he is somebody that just, days prior to this proposal being published on social media, he was, found in contempt by a judge regarding immigration decisions that had happened.
This incident where the Attorney General was held in contempt, it tells you a bit about who he is. So let me just explain. This saga started with the governor signing a law that made it a misdemeanor for anyone in the U.S. illegally to cross into Florida. When a judge put that law on hold, Attorney General Othmeyer sent out a memo and said that law enforcement should ignore the judge's ruling. As you can imagine, that did not make the judge very happy, hence the contempt ruling. Even then, Othmeyer didn't back down. He posted on social media, if being held in contempt is what it costs to defend the rule of law and stand firmly behind President Trump's agenda on illegal immigration, so be it.
I think he's been very aligned with the governor and very quick to support the governor's plan and setting up Florida to be like a blueprint for other states to follow.
So Othmeyer makes this really public pitch for what he's calling Alligator Alcatraz, which seems to be a name chosen just to get Donald Trump's attention, in my personal opinion, because, of course, President Trump had been talking about Alcatraz in the last few weeks and months, talking about bringing Alcatraz back.
It represents something very strong, very powerful in terms of law and order. Our country needs law and order. Alcatraz is, I would say, the ultimate, right? Alcatraz, Sing Sing and Alcatraz, the movies. But it's right now a museum, believe it or not. A lot of people go there.
Clearly, he has some idea about Alcatraz in his mind. And in the past, he's also talked about alligators and snakes and, positioning them along the border to threaten border crossers. So it almost seemed like dangling out something that folks knew would be interesting to President Trump, just to see what would happen. But I'm wondering, when you saw that initial video, you've already said, Othmeyer said, oh, this could be stood up in 30 to 60 days. So what were you anticipating would happen next? Were you anticipating a really quick assemblage of a facility, or were you thinking, oh, this will never happen?
We really didn't think that it was going to happen so quickly, at least. I think my first reaction was, there's no way that this could happen, mostly because this is protected lands. This is the Everglades. This strip of land has already been kind of deemed unsuitable to build because of the environmental study that had already shown the detrimental impacts of building in such a space.
You also had some thoughts about the alligators too, right?
Yeah. So it's really funny because I talked to other Floridians and friends of mine, and alligators, yes, we obviously see alligators being aggressive in videos and things like that. But I've also been in kayaking in various state parks around the state, kayaking when there's an alligator, very close by to me, and I'm not bothered by that at all. I think anytime that I have, a friend visiting from out of town or out of the state, and, their initial reaction is, oh my goodness, there's an alligator right next to us. And it's kind of like, oh my gosh, look how cute. They really don't, they're not as aggressive unless provoked. And it's kind of this, it's part of the beautiful part about living in Florida is this kind of ability to share the environment and to be, in this waterway with an alligator and know that you can do so peacefully.
So there's this 30 to 60 day timeline, theoretically, from the Attorney General. How did that get sped up all of a sudden? Because last week, Donald Trump was really talking about how we put this together in 8 days, which is nuts, first of all. But also, I don't understand the motivation there. Why did a facility need to open that quickly? Did it?
They would argue that it did need to open that quickly. Again, so this was the initial video was, or the initial plan was put out on a Thursday. Over the weekend, the administration let Miami-Dade County know, because the property is owned by Miami-Dade County. They let them know that this was, a letter of intent, that this was part of the plan. That Monday, so just a couple days after, Miami-Dade County responded to officials asking for multiple steps to be taken before this could move forward, asking for more information about what was the plan ahead, asking for information regarding environmental impacts and what would happen if this were to move forward. And then, later that night, state officials responded saying, with another letter of intent saying that they were going to move forward and take over this land.
But how could they do that?
They're doing so through executive orders by Governor Ron DeSantis. And the executive order that the administration is referring to dates back to 2023 when the state saw an influx of Cuban migrants arriving to the Florida Keys. And so using that executive order and referring to this situation as an emergency, the governor has been able to push this plan forward.
That sounds a lot like what Donald Trump is doing at the national level, constantly declaring emergencies, popping open old emergencies and using them as a reason to act.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of people who are opposed to that would draw that comparison. But it is something that, last week, so about a week after this was initially proposed, various groups, including Friends of the Everglades, sued the state, claiming that the state had bypassed a number of regulations, including environmental studies, and also coming forward to the public and bringing this forward.
I mean, I can't imagine they didn't jump ahead of proper procedures if they're building something in 8 days.
And I think that the 8 days is something that the state will, and I think the federal government will continue to tout. But it is something that I think a lot of people are shocked by, the sheer speed in which this has moved forward. And it's believed that the first group of individuals did arrive at the facility just, one day after President Trump toured the space.
It is striking to me that this facility, it's tense in the middle of an airstrip, in the middle of a swamp, in the middle of a state that constantly is hit with hurricanes. I just can't imagine this is safe.
That is a concern, and it is something that a lot of people have raised. I think we are in hurricane season. State Emergency Management Director Kevin Guthrie on Tuesday during that press conference mentioned the facility being built to withstand a Category 2 hurricane. But just hours later, a regular summer storm rolled through, and there's videos online and social media that show, light flooding in the facility, the tents kind of banging in the wind.
Well, notably a Category 2 hurricane, it's more about wind speed, not about water, right?
Correct. Yeah. They also said that there is a hurricane plan if a stronger storm does come through, but that has not been released yet to my knowledge.
Who is supposed to be in this facility? And what is the process supposed to be for them? Like, are people in this facility supposed to be folks who are especially dangerous? Is there going to be some kind of justice system also set up at this facility where they can have hearings in front of judges or access to attorneys? Have any of those questions been answered?
As of right now, it's unclear exactly who will be detained here. I think, the Trump administration and DeSantis have consistently and constantly said, these are going to be the worst of the worst. But we actually don't know exactly who will be brought to this facility. The Miami Herald reported recently, I believe it was last night, that there is a document that they did obtain that indicates that there could, or it does suggest that children could be among the detainees. Children?
How is that the worst of the worst?
That's a good question. And again, this document just suggests that, so we don't know for certain. We also don't know if this is going to be mostly detainees from Florida or from outside of Florida. One thing that was said is that Trump would approve Florida's plan to expedite these deportations by having National Guard members on site to serve as immigration judges.
What you're telling me, it sounds sloppy, but I got to say that it sounds like that's part of the point. Like the whole branding of the facility as Alligator Alcatraz, it sounds goofy, and I feel like it is made to have you see the facility in a certain way as kind of funny, goofy, unserious, and yeah, like the cruelty seems to be part of the point here to me. I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah, I don't think you'd be the only one to say that. But I think the name, and I think the speed. I think this is all part of a plan to really create an image in people's minds in the middle of the Everglades, in the dead of summer, which we've seen extreme heat in Florida. It's only going to get hotter. And so I think it's meant to create this picture that they could prevent having to go to Alligator Alcatraz by self-deporting. And that was a message we heard multiple times throughout this press conference by multiple officials, is this idea that you could avoid it if you wanted to.
After the break, with all this focus on Alligator Alcatraz, are we missing the bigger story of ICE detention? This episode is brought to you by Built. Built is the perfect rewards program for those looking to earn airline miles and hotel points just by paying rent on time. There's no cost to join, and just by paying rent, you unlock flexible points that can be transferred to your favorite hotels and airlines, a future rent payment, your next Lyft ride, and more. When you pay rent through Built, you unlock two powerful benefits. First, you earn one of the industry's most valuable points on rent every month. Second, you gain access to exclusive neighborhood benefits in your city. Built's neighborhood benefits are things like extra points on dining out, complimentary post-workout shakes, free mats or towels at your favorite fitness studios, and unique experiences that only Built members can access. And when you're ready to travel, Built points can be converted to your favorite miles and hotel points around the world, meaning your rent can literally take you places. Start paying rent through Built and take advantage of your neighborhood benefits by going to joinbuilt.com/whatnext. That's JOINBILT.com/whatnext. Make sure to use joinbuilt.com/whatnext to sign up for Built today.
This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy. Just drop in some details about yourself and see if you're eligible to save money when you bundle your home and auto policies. The process only takes minutes, and it could mean hundreds more in your pocket. Visit Progressive.com after this episode to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
At New Balance, we believe if you run, you're a runner. However you choose to do it. Because when you're not worried about doing things the right way, you're free to discover your way. And that's what running is all about. Run your way at newbalance.com/running.
One thing that I think's getting lost in the intense media coverage of so-called Alligator Alcatraz is that conditions in regular immigrant detention in Florida and around the country have really deteriorated under the strain of the president's mass deportation agenda. So can you tell me about the kinds of stories that have been coming out in the last month or two about what it's like in a Florida detention facility? And I say Florida because Florida has really been working hand in glove with the Trump administration to remove a lot of people.
Yeah, I think it's a super fair question. And even, just earlier this week, we had reports of a 75-year-old Cuban man who died in ICE custody here in Miami at Chrome Detention Center.
Yeah, this is Isidro Perez, right?
Mm-hmm. And he was the fifth individual to have died in ICE custody here in Miami. But in the last couple months, we've seen numerous reports of harsh conditions in Chrome, poor or no air conditioning at a couple of these sites. We've also heard of very small environments. We've also heard of broken toilets and things of that nature.
Yeah. I think it's worth lingering on the 75-year-old man who died in immigration detention just because he'd come to this country as a teenager. So he'd been here a long time. It seems like the United States was well aware of his presence. And it's a little unclear to me why he was in detention in the first place. We know that he had some convictions for possession of marijuana in the 80s, but that's a long time ago. And when the administration was asked about his death, Tom Homan, the border czar, basically said, oh, yeah, people die in detention all the time. That's kind of what happens.
I mean, people die in ICE custody. People die in county jails. People die in state prisons. I mean, if you look at, when I was ICE director and we drilled down that, the question should be how many lives does ICE save? Because when they go in detention, we find many with diseases and stuff that we deal with right away.
Which is a really dehumanizing way to put it, because it's implying that this 75-year-old person is so bad for no reason that I know of, but is so bad that he, at the end of his life, let's say he even died of natural causes, he didn't deserve to be with his loved ones. He was so useless that that's how we should treat him. And it really struck me, and it offended me, frankly.
Yeah, I think a lot of, especially immigration advocates, that's kind of what they keep bringing up, that these individuals don't necessarily deserve to be in these conditions in the first place. I think one of the headlines that continues to stick with me is from the Miami Herald is that these men cry every day from these facilities. And so I think that's something that will continue to stick with me is those images coming out of Chrome and just the overpopulation that we've seen at the detention facilities here in Florida, which I think is something to note. While these two kind of storylines aren't necessarily and haven't necessarily been addressed at the same time by officials, they are happening at the same time. It's kind of these parallel storylines happening. You have a story coming out that a fifth person has died while in custody at Chrome, at the same time while officials are touting a new immigration center that people and residents and immigration advocates and environmental organizations are pushing back on and raising concerns of.
Yeah. How have Floridians themselves been responding to what's happening with immigration detention in their state? Because Florida did vote for Donald Trump, but Florida is also now sort of experiencing a lot of what Trump has to offer. And I'm wondering how that's being received.
Yeah, I think there's a couple ways to answer that. I think, we've seen a lot of reports of coming out of Florida of individuals who voted for Trump who have kind of expressed frustration with these policies, arguing that they thought that, he was only going for the criminals and are, now confused or upset that people that either they know or they've heard of are being caught up in this crackdown, in this immigration crackdown. I think, at a local level, Florida has, and Governor DeSantis has made it a priority to have municipalities across the state partner with ICE. And most recently, City of Miami did so. And what we're seeing whenever this option or whenever this measure and proposal comes before local elected officials, you do see a huge outpouring of community members and residents opposing this measure. And then you're even seeing at these protests that have been happening around Alligator Alcatraz. You've seen the first protest, I think, had a couple hundred individuals. I think the second protest, if I'm not mistaken, had even more. So we're seeing this large pushback in South Florida among its residents for these kind of measures related to immigration.
Sommer, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Sommer Brugal is a Miami reporter over at Axios. And that's our show. What Next is produced by Paige Osburn, Elena Schwartz, Rob Gunther, Anna Phillips, Ethan Oberman, and Madeline Ducharme. Ben Richmond is the Senior Director of Podcast Operations here at Slate. And I'm Mary Harris. Go track me down on Blue Sky. I'm at Mary Harris. Thanks for listening. Catch you back here next time.